I'd like to introduce Stig Holmberg. He's the current president of the Swedish Operational Research Association. He's responsible for the systems program at Mid-Sweden University at Östersund, Sweden, where he is a lecturer in informatics. He holds an MSc and a PhD in engineering from the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, and he represents a group that is also one of our special integration groups in the ISSS. So, and we regret that one of our past presidents, Donald Durrott, also part of that group, was not able to attend, but we're delighted to have him in his place representing our Swedish contingent in the ISSS. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Koning. I have a slight problem. John Friends today and Michael Jackson and others yesterday have already said what I was thinking to say. More than that, they have even said it much better than I would be able to say it. But anyhow, I can perhaps solve a practical problem for you. I suppose most of you don't know what Östersund is, and the rest of you don't know what it looks like when it's not raining. So here comes the answer. Anyhow, the Swedish Operational Research Association has just become formally associated with the International Society for System Science. For that reason, I warmly thank ISSS and Professor Koning for their kindness and trust. We are very honored to be here. However, the connections between our societies are far from new. Many of our members, from the beginning in the 50s and up to now, have also been members of ISSS. Two of our most prominent scholars, Professor Kjell Samuelsson and Professor Donald Durrott, have also served as presidents of ISSS. Further, both the operations and systems movements have a common concern in dealing with complex and tricky real-world situations. And for me, I have been working with systems for about 20 years and with operational research for the last 10 years. I have not found any great difference in that. What I have been doing is roughly the same type of problems, roughly the same type of methodologies. But I also know, of course, some people would be very upset if called operational researchers or called system scientists. They feel themselves as one of those groups. So it is also some things that are common and some things that are not common. However, as current president of the Swedish Operational Research Association, I hope that the newly committed association between our two societies will be beneficial for both of us, and that we together, better or even more effectively, will be able to pursue our common endeavor towards a healthier state of world affairs. And with that common history and mission in mind, I would want to make some sort of a summing up by looking at what is the status today within our movements and what is possible actions and developments for the future. I will basically be speaking for operational research, but with our common interest in systemic approaches, my conclusions may to some degree be relevant also for other branches of the system field, I hope. So, what is our situation today? I will not have possibility here to describe it in all details, but it's an excellent book by Paul Keyes. The name of the book is Operational Research and Systems. And Paul Keyes describes what has happened within operational research over the years, and perhaps you can look at the next slide, something like this. Okay, of course, Michael Jackson yesterday showed us a picture that the operational researchers were the bad guys. That may be true, but anyhow, it has happened a lot also within operational research over the years. And at a very big level, I think that in the beginning, perhaps what we did within operational research was more to the left on that picture. It means the work with simple problems, the more unitary goals, was just one stakeholder, environment wasn't excluded, the decision makers didn't take part in the problem-solving process. It was supposed to have clear and complete data, and the system level was rather low many times. But it has changed over the years, and at least in Sweden, we now work on the other side of that picture, with complex problems, coercive goals, many stakeholders, environment included as far as possible, active decision makers, incomplete and ambiguous data, and a rather high system level. In the same thing, it's also a very good book by George Clear with the name of Facets of System Science. Det finns en annan. Inte den och inte den. Näst tror jag en till. Ja, den. Yes, George Clear, Facets of System Science, he describes what has happened in systems movement over the years. And we can see here, for example, that we have a development of methodologies. So if we have a time scale here, this can represent the group of hard system methodologies. That was the first system methodologies. They gone up to a maximum, they fell back. After that, in the 60s perhaps, come the soft system methodologies. And afterwards, in the 80s, came the total system intervention. And that is not the last step, I think, but I haven't identified any further steps yet. Anyhow, we have a development in both parts. Anyhow, both Keyes and George Clear are rather positive in their judgment of the prospects of the systems movement. And they think that there is a future, and that future will be rather important for our movements. On the other hand, Akov, in a rather recent paper, it was published in System Research, I think 3 or 4 years ago, and it was reprinted in one of the latest book of Akov 1 year ago. In this paper, Akov is more critical, especially towards the current state within operational research. Really, he seriously questions if a renaissance or resurrection of operational research is still possible. Well, what do I think? I think it's easily to find evidence for both positions. First, we can look at our concern in difficult and complex world problems. I think that if we look at energy problems, climate problems, war, conflicts, food starvation, population problems, and so on, or even our organizations, of course we can find improvements, but at large I think that not so much has happened over the years. Those problems are still very pressing and severe, so we have not solved them. So in a way we must be much better than we are today. We have not accomplished what we have set out as our goals, as I can see it. On the other hand, if you look at the proceedings from conferences like this, if you take part in what is published in different systems, journals, and so on, the result of our work is very impressive. It's, what I can understand, more than 10,000 research years by now has been put into the systems research. So of course we have a lot of knowledge and a lot of results. So and that is put us in a very difficult situation, I think. We must, some sort of a balance act. We must argue for the strength of the system approach so that we can have the visibility on the status that we deserve as system scientists and system workers. On the other hand, we may not be too, promise too much, promising to being able to solve any difficult or complex world problem. If we do that, we will be called, we will be seen as dilettantes, and that's not good too. In a way, unfortunately, I think, in a way we seem to have succeeded with both mistakes. We are too timid in many aspects. In Sweden, to take an example, some years ago, 5 years ago, the Swedish government thought, at least, that they were facing some severe problems. So they turned to the research community for having advice, but they didn't come to system scientists. They went to a group of economists and asked them what do we ought to do. And of course, we don't have to blame the economists. They jumped on the occasion, of course, and took the chance. But perhaps we have to blame ourselves. I didn't protest, and none of my colleagues did protest and say in the public debate that it's wrong to go to the economists. They can just give one perspective of this situation. You ought to go to the systems movements and the system community for have your problems solved. In the same way, also in Sweden, it has lately been a great national effort to produce a new national encyclopedia representing the official truth in the end of last century. And that's impressive work. But if you look at all the words with a connection to systems movement and operational research and things like that, it's all described with a patronizing and ridiculing attitude as something not very serious, nothing that you can joke about. And of course, that's also perhaps our own fault. Evidently, none from the systems movement fought for being in the committee guiding the work with that encyclopedia, and the result became what it was. So that is one problem, that we have to be both more visible and at the same time enough timid that we are just at the beginning of the research era anyhow. Most what is to know about systems we still don't know. So same as George Cleese says in his book, that we must have a lot of severe or sincere research work in front of us. And it is too easy, of course, to say, it's more easy to say that you have a holistic attitude and that you work holistically. It's much more difficult to do it. But I think it's important that we do also what we say, or we, as I said earlier, we will be seen as dilettantes. Another problem is that what we has already accomplished in research, it is difficult to handle that for all of us. Len Troncalis some years ago compiled a list of what he called basic system concepts or isomorphisms. And he said that any system scientist at least ought to master those concepts. I don't know if it's exactly those, but anything like that. It's about 80 or nearly 100 concepts. But he also says that most of us coming to conferences like this one, we just know a handful of those concepts. Len is a very nice man, so I suppose that was overestimate. On the other hand, my wife used to say that I don't know anything at all. That perhaps is a slight underestimate, I hope. But anyhow, it is very few of us who masters all those concepts, and that is also just a mini set of what we ought to know. So in a way we ought to be better, even here. So what can we do about this? I can see that in a way the system's movements has been successful, but in a way it has not been enough successful. So I would like to go over to some proposals what we can do as an agenda for future research and development within our area. And the first point may be how to take care of a system's heritage in form of systemic knowledge that we have already found in the research. As I see it, it's not much use in doing great research in one end and finding a lot of new system principles and more or less directly forgetting about it on the other side. You must keep it up and keep it living. That is, but without help we will not be able to manage that. This sad fact is due to what Herbert Simon has called the bounded rationality of the human being. Hence, in order to master our common systemic knowledge and other relevant knowledge as well, we would benefit from some sort of support. Today's libraries, databases, and websites, however, are not able to serve that purpose. They are just excellent data storages. The device I have in mind, on the other hand, will help us to see the relations between different research findings, and it will make the implications of each clear and evident. Further, it needs to help us identify what is most relevant and important in each situation, and it needs to show us what to extract from different data storages. In short, it will expand our short-time memory in pushing Miller's fatal number of 7 towards perhaps 70 or even higher. That enlarge our set of what we can have in mind at one time. Unfortunately, I have no working example of such a device to show you today, but I'm working on it, I'm thinking about it. And I think that Stafford Beer's work on infosets and Teams integrity could form a good platform for launching even such a development work, how to handle a lot of information in different and to really master it. In connection with this, I also can identify another problem. It is to introducing new generations into systems thinking. What I have understood, in some countries, more than about 50% of the population are younger than 20 years. That put those countries in an immense education problem, how to educate all those young people. And as we spoke some days ago about energy density, perhaps it's also possible to speak about, define a new variable, education density or knowledge density. If that variable goes down, I think it may be as severe as if the food problem or energy problem or something of the other big problems. However, even here, the task to educate young people could benefit from some sort of support, and I think tonight Len Troncale will demonstrate such a system, and that perhaps just how to trigger our thinking about what to do. Another point I will discuss with you is what I call a System Watch Institute. We have something, organizations like World Watch Institute, sensing, analyzing, and reporting what is happening with our entire world. And in a similar way, I think we need now a System Watch Institute. Institute continuously sensing, evaluating, and reporting what is happening within our system movements. As we heard here, we are more than 20 organizations behind this meeting, And I think no one has an overview of what is happening all over the field, what initiatives are good, what initiatives are less good, what to support, where it is possible to make connections and found synergetic effects and so on. So without such an institute, many possible and desirable cross-fertilizations risk to be missed and so on. And such an institute that I'm speaking about, it could also work to define appropriate or advisable research agenda, what we don't know yet and what we need to find in the future. Even here, Ras Eckhoff, many years ago, wrote a book about the National Scientific Library System, and one of the functions in that National Library System is very like what I'm speaking about here. So, due to the technological development, a realization today would be even more straightforward and effective than in Eckhoff's discussion more than 20 years ago. Time is running, but I also want to say here the last thing about development strategies. In order to promote and strengthen the system movements, I think it would also be beneficial to rethink our own development strategies. One thing, for example, is to have common discussions for identifying desirable goals and feasible actions. Alternative idealized futures may be designed and discussed. In order to achieve full commitment around the results, all members ought to be engaged in those discussions and design activities. That, in its turn, requires special procedures and arrangement. Even here, I think Staff for B's team's integrity seems to constitute a well-designed protocol for this. Further, Marcus Schröninger and others have demonstrated that the team's integrity protocol can be distributed geographically over the whole world, and it can be extended to a continuous and routine-based development activity. Another thing, in reporting on our achievements, perhaps we don't ought to go to a common conference like this one. Perhaps it is much better to go to non-systems conferences and publish in non-systems journals. In that way, we will increase the visibility and dispersion of systems work. After all, it is not ourselves we need to convince about the supremacy of a systems approach. Instead, we need to meet and influence as many new people as possible. I will stop with this part. I could go on for a lot of possible actions, but the time is running, so I will go to some sort of a conclusion. My conclusion is something like this, that starting with is an Australian quantum physicist, Gerald Milburn, has written a book where he concludes that if we accept the findings of quantum physics and the fact that the physical world is a quantum world, when a quantum computer is not only possible but inevitable. In the same way, I think, as the world is not only a quantum world, but it is also a systemic world, systemic thinking and systemic acting will be a certainty with time, not only within a system society, but in all parts of human life. In that respect, I am also optimistic of the long-run future of the system's movements. The problems we are facing may be severe, but anyhow, they are not so they are only so in a short time perspective. The remedies I have proposed here, or I had only time to mention a few of them, but anyhow, the remedies I have proposed may not necessarily be the best ones or the ones that we can agree on, but I have, I hope, demonstrated that it is possible to put a long list of actions, possible actions, to take. Hence, the crucial, with that list of possible actions, hence the crucial point is not the lack of means, but if we are willing to erase a common commitment to use them. I hope we will do. Thank you for your attention.